I'm Greg Sherbert. My wife and I run Forest Shepherd Farm over in Berkeley Springs. We're a fruit and nut tree nursery. Today we're going to talk about one of many options for building soil in our area. Anybody have hard ground like this, like we're standing on here? It's pretty hard, it's pretty dry this time of year, and it seems to happen every year. We get plenty of rain here, but then it just ends up running off. And we're not able to capture and store that water, which is more than enough to grow pretty much anything, including pawpaws in an upland place like we're standing on right here, where they typically, like you heard from Todd, be down in the lower areas. One potential solution to build that soil is Keyline Agroforestry. Just think of it, it's a new way to envision agriculture here in West Virginia. Something that is both profitable for people and for the environment. When I think about land planning, I like to use the Regrarians platform framework, where we always start with your context, and that's going to be different for everybody here. Everybody's going to have a different piece of land, and they're going to want to do different things with it. So we'd start there, and these are in order of hardest to change all the way down to easiest to change. Today we're going to talk about soils, which are typically thought of as being hard to change, but they're pretty far down on this list, you'll see it. We're going to use water and geography to do that. So the climate would be your context, the geography would be, and the weather. The geography is the landform around us, which can be a positive, but is often a negative. Any slope tends to run that water right off. Thinking about this hard soil that we all have, but we've had plenty of rain. Most of us would say we had a pretty wet spring, almost too wet. We had 10 inches of rain in May at our house. It saturated the ground, and now it's out and it's hard like this. And if you were to dig a hole here, it'd be pretty taxing to dig into this soil. There's not much root going on, more than 3 inches deep down there. We end up with these hard soils that the rain lands on, plenty of rain like I said, and just rolls right off, and then becomes a problem and causes flooding in our creeks and our floodplains, and takes out our pawpaw trees, which tend to live down there. We have some that have quite the angle on them from that flood in 2018, where they still have an angle because they were all pushed over and ripped out of the ground. That flood didn't need to happen if we could do what we're talking about here. And like you saw that picture in the beginning, I think that would be a nice way to see Appalachia from the sky. It would be a picture of an Appalachia where people can earn a living on the land instead of having to export their labor and go work in a big city. So that is another common problem we all have. Our low fertility land leads to no work. There's no viable income from the land. I think there's a common solution to all these, the flooding, the lack of a rural economy, and the hard dry soil. We can't grow anything. It's just improve the soil. We're going to talk about infiltrating our rainwater into the ground, building that soil, and then we have a goal on our farm that our rainwater leaves our farm only as groundwater. If it lands on our farm, it soaks into the ground, it can leave, it all makes its way down to Sleepy Creek eventually at our place, but I don't want it running off on the surface. That surface water is warm. It's warm and it ends up in the creek, and it usually takes soil with it. And so now we have warm water and soil in the creeks, killing fish and life in the water. Currently, I figure this is just kind of average, but we generally have silt loams around here, which tend to really compact very hard, as we talked about right here. And figure you can store about the equivalent of ½ an inch of rain in that silt loam soil with a low organic matter. But it's still a lot of water. I think people don't realize how much water that really is. And I think 1 inch of rain on an acre is 27,000 gallons or something like that. So in our soil, we generally have about ½ an inch of rainwater stored in there, which I tried to give you some comparisons so people can kind of visualize, that is a lot of water per acre. You've got multiple shipping containers per acre of water in your soil, but it doesn't infiltrate. Well, that's a lot of water. What's really possible and what we could achieve, and goal for our farm is in the next 10 years, we're looking for 18 inches of good friable topsoil, which is like a 7x increase in that water storage, and much, maybe a 10x increase in that water infiltration, so that we can actually absorb a 2-inch rain event when it comes. A 2-inch rain event should not be flooding on our local creeks. It should, you know, if we got 1.8 inches at our house in a half an hour a couple weeks ago, we captured pretty much all of it. There was very little, if any, rainwater runoff, but all around us, I mean, the creek rose, we got a flood from it. That's just such a waste. We just lost all that water. And without that water, you can't build that soil. So we're looking for, you know, at least 2 inches of rainwater infiltration per hour, and that's just not going to happen like this. So there's kind of a recap of that. One way I'm looking at doing this is keyline pattern cultivation. So keyline is a system that came out of Australia where they don't have reliable groundwater. You can't just pretty much here anywhere. You will hit water if you drill it well, but that's not the case in Australia. They keep a lot of surface water. And this guy, P.A. Yeomans, who was a mining engineer in the 40s and 50s in Australia, a gold miner, and he needed to have water available at all times for his mining operations. And he kind of took what he knew from capturing rainwater and translated it into farming with this really brilliant system. And Keyline is one of the concepts that permaculture was really built upon. But it's basically a cultivation pattern when we apply it to farming that's going to evenly distribute water in the landscape. So we get an inch of rain on, you know, you can probably everybody here probably has hills if you're around this area. So you have a ridge and then you have a depression or a valley. When we get an inch of rain, when that rolls off, you really got like 2 inches of rain in the valley and nothing up on the ridge, really. And the valleys become too saturated, then they overflow, then they flood into the creeks. So Keyline seeks to take that valley water and redistribute it back out to the ridges so that it's more evenly distributed. This is a pattern, you know, this is a bigger landscape than a lot of people will have, but the pattern works even on a smaller scale. It works on your half-acre garden. I don't think we ought to always be trying to keep water on contour. A lot of swales are put on contour. That's great and it has its application, but in many cases we'd be better off to redistribute that water back out to the ridges where it's more useful. Often with keyline, trees would then be planted along that pattern, which is that opening picture we had would have been that, or this pattern here. You're going to have a ridge coming out this way, here, and here, valley over here. This is going to be just the way you drive your vehicle. You're going to leave ruts in the ground, and that water will follow those ruts. So all of our movement across the landscape can take into consideration the way that water is moving and redistribute it. It's a missed opportunity not to do that. One tool we'll talk about is the Yeomans plow. It's really just a really nice subsoiler, which is it's a big tooth a tractor can pull through the ground to rip it. It's a very useful tool for what we're talking about. The small scale equivalent would be the broad fork, so for the handheld scale. This is satellite. This is our farm, our piece right here, about 40 acres, and then we're going to be working on our neighbor's 6-acre field right here. This is a floodplain up here, and we're more like a mid-level terrace, so different types of soil, different plants like to grow into both of them. And I'm going to show a picture of a zoom in on our property. That's the whole thing. Anybody that's used to reading contour maps can see that this is a floodplain down here, like I was talking about. This is where water would flow on our property. So you can see one place where we've had issues is this gully right here that I would bet didn't exist 100, 150 years ago. This gully is probably human created. I haven't been able to, you can't get a satellite or a aerial footage or video photo from way back when. There's evidence, you won't be able to see it out there, but I have made some maps that use today's modern LiDAR data. You can still see where the tractor wheels or plow lines went this way across this field, and this probably all used to be soil that was farmable. It's thousands or hundreds of thousands of tons of soil that have made their way down to Sleepy Creek, out to the Potomac, and then down to the Chesapeake Bay, taking all the, but it's not just right here, it would have been off the whole surface of the farm too. And that's from a cultivation pattern that was just looking for I mean, people were farming with horses to start with, obviously that's hard. So you're gonna go the shortest route. So the easiest thing. Well, we're gonna look at a different pattern, and keep in mind this does apply to your small scale properties as well. So we have that drainage down here, we have this drainage up here. So we read some permaculture books and we decided we needed swales everywhere. And a swale, if you don't know, if you were looking at the cross section, is like a sine curve. And there's a ditch, and then you take the spoils from the ditch and make a berm or a hill after it. And so when water rolls downhill, it gets caught in the ditch. And so I'll show you a picture. My wife and I spent a couple frigid February days with this laser level right here, tracking around our field. I had never looked at a contour map of this before, so we did pretty good. We definitely missed a few places. And these are ditches that I then cut in with a plow all along our field. For context, this is about 18 acres right here, the farmed portion. So these swales, if you can see these where the water flows, you can see that the swales are intercepting all that water flow and then redistributing it out to the ridges, and it works great. When we first did this, the infiltration was very slow, so when a little rain, we would get all of that would run off, and then it would fill the swales almost to the brink, and it would sit for a couple days sometimes before it soaked in. Not long enough to grow mosquitoes, but long enough to capture. And for context, one inch of rainwater saved here is about 500,000 gallons. So it's a significant amount of water. You're not going to pull that out of your well, if you were trying to irrigate it, and it's free and it's falling out of the sky. And we suffer the humidity on this side of the country in exchange for this miracle of rain. Let's not let it run away. So we did these swales. We then planted trees on the berms, all kinds of different trees because we have a fruit and nut tree nursery. We didn't protect them from deer quite enough, and then the ones that didn't die from deer did die from voles because the swales proved to be unmowable. So while this was very functional, it would be very functional for growing trees, or if we were just going to let the ground reforest. We're actually starting over with a similar pattern of straight line keyline, which is going to be a lot more functional. All these lines will be planted to trees. I think we have 2,500 trees that are going in right here, and then another 7,500 on our neighbor's property. A lot of those are willows, so they're planted really tight. It's about 10,000 trees that are going in the next couple years, and we'll be pulling the yeoman's plow, which we'll talk about next, on this pattern. We graze cattle out here, grass-fed, like rotationally grazed every day. This is a lot more functional. These swales were very hard to fence out with temporary fencing, and they're also really good at breaking ankles. They were a little difficult. They're also way farther apart than the keyline plow. So the keyline plow that we'll talk about right here kind of looks like this. It's just a subsoiler, but it's a special the shank design doesn't disturb the soil too much. Like I said, on a small scale, you can get this effect with a broad fork. It's not turning the soil over, you're just ripping a slot through the ground. This is somewhere flat, but if you imagine this picture was on an angle to be relevant to West Virginia, if that water is rolling down here, it wants to roll on the surface and then it has to drop into the slot. And in effect, by over here, we're going to do that every 3 feet on this pattern. So water can only go 3 feet before it drops into a slot and loses its speed. And then the lines make their way slightly out to the ridges at a slow speed. So the water goes over the surface, down into the slot, and slowly moves out to the ridge, hydrating the ridge and dehydrating the valley a little bit. I think that the yeoman's plow or some kind of subsoiling on a pattern, it's often done just crisscross, and that just doesn't make any sense. That's going to dehydrate the landscape a lot. The pattern is really important. Is one of the best ways to break this compaction, but the next step is to seed it immediately and get biology in there. So when you do your broad forking or your yeoman's plowing, get some seed on it and get some roots growing down in that slot where they can grow. You'll make a shallow pass, and we're just going to continually break through that compaction. And by doing this, PA Yeomans, who started with shale with 0 topsoil, was able to get 18 inches of topsoil in a fairly short period of time. He built topsoil in place. It all happened, it's all been built in place where it is anyway. Nobody brought this, what was here, in. We can build it all here. We can just do it a whole lot faster with diesel fuel. And then next year or next season, you would come back and rip right next to it a little deeper and a little deeper and a little deeper till we get 18 inches of nice friable soil with a great infiltration rate. So you can imagine, just to recap that, anytime this water tries to accumulate, it's now being sent out to the ridges and sunk into the ground, growing something, because life is the only real way to build soil. Soil is living dirt. So in this case, there's very little life in soil like this, which many of us are starting with. So you're going to want to seed something in there. Something, if it's a springtime ripping, you're going to want to seed something really vigorous like sorghum Sudan grass, or something that will just completely fill that root channel, that whole channel with roots, and maintain that channel. I have ripped most of this as well with the traditional subsoil, but it's pretty similar to that fancy yeoman's plow that's really expensive. I have ripped it, and I just assumed that the grass from our field would grow over. I think I would have done a lot better to seed it immediately right into there and drip in some compost tea. Trees in the pattern would kind of look something like this. These are still young. They're in tree tubes, which is kind of essential. I think I heard Todd talking about protection from deer in the last talk. Deer are a whole other subject. So in a system like this, you would then lay it out and rip it so all that water stays in there. And see, the water will go down and either hit subsoil or the bottom of where you fractured it with the plow, and then it will move laterally through the ground as well. But it can't go that far before serious roots like tree roots grab it up. So it makes a really nice pattern, and this is where that first picture of the context comes in. Are you grazing animals under here? Or do you have a vegetable garden? Are you growing corn? Whatever you're doing. But it also gives you a nice thin row. We'll often size these so it's like if someone's making hay, this is like 4 passes with your rake or whatever your biggest piece of equipment is. It's not taking up a lot of space, as many farmers will tell you. Why in the world would I plant trees in my field? That's going to be a nightmare when I try to make hay. But we're really not taking up a lot of space. We're adding a layer of income. If this was a row of pawpaw trees, that row of pawpaw trees through your hay field is worth more when the fruit is properly grown and sold and you put a little time into it than the whole field worth of hay. So I think farmers can get on board with that. But you wouldn't have to plant trees. Just the cultivation pattern alone. There's a whole lot of options. This is a picture of what we'd call silvopasture, which is livestock integration So basically trees planted through pasture, silvo meaning forest and pasture. I think those are sheep. Yeah, these are honey locusts, thornless honey locusts. Here they drop a huge big pod full of sugar in the wintertime. So when the grass kind of dies down for the winter, the sheep have something great. And they have a nice dappled shade that grows more grass in the case of honey locusts. Certain trees will grow a lot less grass. You put sugar maples in there or something, you're going to get no grass under them. You can see there's a ton of options. Basically, all of our orchards that used to be around here, they're all on that straight grid, but we would have done a lot better and saved a lot more soil by putting on a more sensible pattern. This is where we're going with our place. You can see there's just trees all over the place, but on that pattern, planted pretty tight. This is our context as a fruit and nut tree nursery. We want propagation material. This wouldn't make sense for almost anybody else. I did want to say one thing about this. I forgot to mention it on the swales thing. This gully where I was saying that we were losing soil, after we did those swales, it was Hurricane Helene that our swales that was the only time they've been overrun in like 5 or 6 years, where they were overfilled. And we did get a little bit of washout down here. But it was the first time when we got there were no leaves and just bare soil, and that was just the mountain was shrinking back every year. Patterning like this does work. And that was just with the swales, just catching that water because it would just sheet flow right off. Pawpaws are one tree that I think make a lot of sense in agroforestry systems. It's a tree that really likes fertile soil, and you're not going to grow it anywhere up here unless you grow your topsoil first. There is a kind of famous farm out in Iowa, and they grow pawpaws, chestnuts, and black walnuts all right together. And anybody that knows those three trees would say, okay, pawpaws and black walnuts, but chestnuts in the same place. But it's because in their case, they probably have 30 feet of topsoil. But we can still get to that place where we could mix them in together. Getting pawpaws into your field, it's just going to be a lot more productive probably than what any other farmers are doing, which can bring an economy back here so people can live on the land as opposed to having to export and take their labor somewhere else. Just some stats on what something like this could do on our watershed over in Sleepy Creek. Even if we were to just do this on the farmland acres there, about 16,000 acres just in the soil. If we built the soil that I'm talking about, I don't know if anybody knows this 200-acre lake, Sleepy Creek Mountain Lake, we could, in our farmed acres alone, if we grew to 18 inches of topsoil, we could keep the amount of water, 2 times the amount of water in that lake, in the soil where it's needed. Any questions? Oh yeah, is it hard to see? I meant to take that off. It's just an Aldo Leopold quote that I really like. A thing is right when it tends to preserve the integrity, stability, and beauty of the biotic community. It's wrong when it tends to otherwise. So this is the Appalachia I'm talking about making. We have to do this, but this is an Appalachia with soil and livelihood here. Does anybody have any questions?
So for swales you would go on contour normally, but you said with keylines, it looked like they were close to contour?
You know, it's finding that balance of what's functional. On contour looks